Imagine you finally have everything you ever wanted. The opportunity is real. The timing is perfect. And then, quietly, without warning, you destroy it yourself. Not because you failed. Not because the world stopped you. But because some invisible part of you decided, in a language you never learned to speak, that you didn't deserve it. Think about that for a moment. The most dangerous enemy you will ever face isn't out there in the world. It's the version of you that shows up right before a breakthrough and whispers, "Turn back." Most people assume self-sabotage looks dramatic. They picture addiction, explosive rage, or walking away from a relationship in a blaze of chaos. But the truth is far more subtle and far more terrifying than that. Self-sabotage looks like procrastinating on the email that could change your life. It looks like starting arguments with people you love, right when things are going well. It looks like staying up until 3 a.m. doing absolutely nothing, when tomorrow is the most important day of your year. It hides in plain sight. It disguises itself as laziness, as bad timing, as just not feeling it today. And because it wears such an ordinary mask, most people never even realize they're doing it at all. Here's what no one tells you. Self-sabotage is not a character flaw. It is not weakness. It is not stupidity. It is a deeply intelligent psychological response to something that happened to you long before you were old enough to understand what was happening. Your nervous system learned, at some critical point in your development, that success was dangerous, that being seen was unsafe, that wanting too much leads to devastating loss. And it never forgot that lesson even when everything around you changed. This is the conversation that psychology textbooks skim past. This is the mechanism that self-help books reduce to limiting beliefs and mindset shifts, as if the whole architecture of your survival instincts could be dismantled with a morning affirmation. Today we're going deeper. Not just into what self-sabotage is, but into why it exists, where it was born, and what it is actually trying to protect you from. Because here's the shift that changes everything. Self-sabotage is not your enemy. It is a misguided protector that never grew up. By the end of this, you won't just understand self-sabotage intellectually. You'll recognize it in yourself in ways that may feel uncomfortable, even confronting. You'll trace it back to its origin. And for the first time, you might actually have a real conversation with the part of you that keeps pulling you backward. If this kind of deep psychological exploration is what you're here for, the kind that doesn't flatten human experience into 5 easy steps, then stay close to this channel. Every video is built to do what this one is doing right now, take you somewhere most content is too afraid to go. Now, let's begin with an uncomfortable truth that most people are not ready to hear. You are not self-sabotaging because you're broken. You are self-sabotaging because you are working exactly as designed. The problem is that the design is outdated, and no one handed you the manual to update it. The human brain was not built for modern ambition. It was built for survival in an uncertain, frequently dangerous world where standing out could get you killed, where failure within a tribe often meant exile, and where hope, unchecked hope, was a vulnerability predators could exploit. Your ancestors didn't survive by being bold and radically visible. They survived by being careful, by belonging, by not reaching too far beyond what the group considered safe. And those survival patterns didn't disappear when you got a Wi-Fi connection and a career goal. They went underground. They became your inner voice. They became the inexplicable exhaustion you feel right before a big opportunity. They became the self-destructive choices that seem to come from nowhere, but always seem to arrive at the worst possible moment. Sigmund Freud called this the repetition compulsion, the unconscious tendency to recreate familiar emotional conditions, even painful ones, because familiarity registers in the nervous system as safety. You don't repeat patterns because you enjoy suffering. You repeat them because your brain has cataloged them as known, and known to the primitive brain means survivable. Carl Jung went even further. He argued that what you refuse to make conscious will run your life from the shadows and call itself fate. The part of you that keeps undermining your progress isn't random chaos. It is organized. It has logic. It has a history. And until you look directly at it, it will keep writing the ending of your story without your permission. This is the core of what we're exploring. Not surface-level behavior change. Not tips and hacks. But the deeper architecture of why intelligent, capable, deeply self-aware people still find ways to stand in their own light and cast shadows on themselves. There is a concept in developmental psychology called the upper limit problem. Gay Hendricks, in his landmark work The Big Leap, describes it as an internal thermostat, a set point for how much success, love, and happiness your subconscious believes you are allowed to experience before something must go wrong. When your life rises above that invisible threshold, your nervous system triggers a correction. Not consciously, not deliberately, but with devastating efficiency, you will find a way to bring things back down to the temperature your inner world considers normal. You'll start a fight with your partner right after the most connected week you've had together. You'll get sick the morning of the presentation you've been preparing for months. You'll find a reason, always a perfectly logical reason, to step back from the edge of something extraordinary. And here's what makes this so psychologically insidious. The sabotage always comes with a justification. The mind is not sloppy. It doesn't just pull the rug out and leave you staring at the ceiling. It constructs a narrative, a story that makes the retreat feel reasonable, even noble. I was protecting my peace. The timing wasn't right. I didn't want to seem arrogant. Maybe I'm not really ready yet. These aren't lies exactly. They're something more dangerous. They're half-truths dressed in the language of wisdom, making it nearly impossible to see the fear beneath them. This is where systems come in. Because the upper limit problem doesn't exist in a vacuum. It is fed every single day by a culture that profits from your self-doubt and calls it humility, that mistakes smallness for safety and loudly rewards the performance of struggle over the quiet confidence of self-belief. Think about how you were educated. From the very first years of school, the system was not designed to help you understand yourself. It was designed to make you manageable, obedient, comparable. You were graded not on depth of thinking, but on compliance with expected answers. Creativity that fell outside the rubric was penalized. Questions that disrupted the lesson were redirected. The child who sat quietly and reproduced information correctly was celebrated. The child who asked why the information existed at all was told to stay after class. What does that do to a developing mind? It teaches a foundational equation. Visibility is risky, conformity is rewarded, and the safest version of you is the smallest version of you. That equation gets written into the architecture of your self-concept before you're old enough to question it. Then technology arrived and made everything worse in the most elegant possible way. Social media didn't just give you a platform. It gave you a real-time measurement of your worth, quantified in likes, followers, engagement rates, and it handed that measurement to the most emotionally vulnerable part of your psychology. The comparison engine runs 24 hours a day now. You wake up and within seconds you are measuring your inside world against everyone else's curated outside. And what that constant comparison does beneath the surface is reinforce the subconscious belief that you are perpetually behind, perpetually insufficient, perpetually not quite enough. That belief is the oxygen that self-sabotage breathes. Because if you're not enough, why would you deserve to succeed? If everyone else seems further along, what right do you have to stand out? The internal logic is airtight, even though the premise is entirely false. Albert Bandura, the psychologist behind social learning theory, spent decades studying what he called self-efficacy, your belief in your own capacity to execute and succeed. He found something quietly revolutionary. People with low self-efficacy don't just perform worse. They actively avoid challenges that would prove their capability because the risk of confirmation, of finally knowing for certain that they are inadequate, is too psychologically threatening to face. This is the trap within the trap. You don't try so you never fail, but you also never succeed. And the not trying becomes its own evidence of inadequacy, feeding the very belief that caused the avoidance in the first place. It is a closed loop of devastating psychological precision. Now ask yourself, and ask this seriously, not rhetorically, how many opportunities have you not pursued not because they were wrong for you, but because pursuing them would have forced you to confront whether you actually believe in yourself? How many applications not sent? How many conversations not started? How many creative works left unfinished at 80%, because finishing would mean releasing them into the world where they could be judged and judged unfavorably, and that judgment would confirm the story you've been quietly carrying for years? This is the conversation that never happens at the surface level. People talk about procrastination as a time management problem. They download productivity apps. They create accountability systems. But the procrastination was never about time. It was about terror, the specific terror of being fully seen and found wanting. Erik Erikson mapped the stages of psychological development and found that the crises we don't resolve in early life don't disappear. They follow us. The child who never felt truly safe expressing themselves becomes the adult who edits their personality before entering a room. The teenager whose enthusiasm was consistently met with ridicule becomes the professional who shrinks their ideas before presenting them, pre-sabotaging to avoid the anticipated rejection. We carry our unresolved histories in our nervous systems, in our patterns, in the reflexive way we flinch away from our own potential. And the most painful part, the part that deserves to sit with you for a moment, is that most people go their entire lives without ever connecting the present pattern to the past wound. They just call themselves lazy, undisciplined, unlucky. They construct an identity around their limitations rather than recognizing those limitations as learned responses to old, specific, and ultimately outdated emotional experiences. But it goes deeper than even this, because the self-sabotage isn't just psychological, it is relational. And that layer, the social dimension of why we undermine ourselves, is perhaps the most rarely examined and the most quietly devastating of all. There is a psychological phenomenon called tall poppy syndrome. It doesn't originate in a laboratory or a clinical study. It emerges from the oldest, most primal layer of human social dynamics, the unspoken rule that says if you grow too tall, the people around you will cut you down. And the devastating twist is that you don't wait for them to do it. You start cutting yourself first. This is the relational dimension of self-sabotage that almost no one discusses openly. Because to discuss it honestly, you have to confront something deeply uncomfortable, that some part of your self-limitation is not about fear of failure at all. It is about fear of what success would cost you socially. Think about your closest relationships, the friendships built in the trenches of shared struggle, the family dynamics that were established when you were the one who needed help, who hadn't figured it out yet, who was still becoming. Now ask yourself, what happens to those relationships if you actually arrive? What happens to the friend group when one person breaks away from the shared ceiling? What happens to the family narrative when the child who was supposed to repeat the pattern refuses to? What happens to the relationship that was built on a certain balance of power when that balance shifts? These are not abstract questions. They are the invisible social contracts that govern more of your behavior than you have ever been given permission to admit. The psychologist Murray Bowen developed a concept called family systems theory, which proposes that families operate like emotional units, each member playing a role that maintains the system's equilibrium. When one person in that system begins to change, to grow beyond their assigned role, the system exerts pressure to pull them back. Not always consciously, not always maliciously, but with remarkable consistency and force. The parent who subtly undermines your confidence, not out of cruelty, but because you're surpassing them, activates their own unexamined shame. The friend who responds to your excitement with skepticism, not because they want you to fail, but because your momentum confronts the stillness they've made peace with. The partner who becomes distant right when you're most energized, not because they don't love you, but because your transformation is quietly threatening the version of you they fell in love with and built their security around. You absorb all of this. You internalize the resistance as evidence. You translate the social friction of growth into confirmation that maybe you were wrong to try, wrong to want, wrong to believe that a different life was actually available to you. And then, fluently and invisibly, you perform the retreat. You call it being realistic. You call it not wanting to lose people. You call it staying grounded. But what you're actually doing is making yourself smaller to fit inside a space that was never meant to be your permanent address. Here is where the internal conflict becomes almost unbearable in its complexity. Because it is not simply logic versus fear. It is love versus growth. It is loyalty to the people who shaped you versus fidelity to the person you're capable of becoming. And no productivity framework, no morning routine, no motivational speech ever prepares you for the specific grief of outgrowing something you deeply love. This is why the empowerment industry fails so many people. It treats self-sabotage as an individual malfunction and prescribes individual solutions. Journal more, think positively, set better goals. But you are not a standalone unit. You are a relational being, embedded in systems of meaning, belonging, and identity that were built long before you started watching self-improvement content. To truly address self-sabotage, you have to be willing to examine not just your habits but your loyalties. Not just your mindset but your relationships. Not just what you believe about yourself in isolation, but what you believe about what success would mean for the people who are watching you, and whether, somewhere deep inside, you've decided their comfort is worth more than your potential. Friedrich Nietzsche wrote about what he called ressentiment, a festering psychological state born from the suppression of one's own power, turned inward as self-contempt. He argued that the most dangerous thing a human being can do is deny their own will to grow, because that denial doesn't disappear. It transforms into a quiet, corrosive resentment of others who succeeded, of systems that limited you, and eventually, most painfully, of yourself. The person who consistently self-sabotages often carries exactly this kind of internal resentment, though they rarely name it as such. It surfaces as cynicism about other people's success, as dark humor about ambition, as the reflexive need to find the flaw in every opportunity before it can become a disappointment. The armor is sophisticated. The wound beneath it is ancient. And now, consider the cultural scaffolding that normalizes all of this. We live in a society that has commodified suffering in one breath and pathologized vulnerability in the next. We celebrate the grind, the sleepless nights, the sacrifices, the relentless hustle, while quietly punishing the people who say out loud that they want more, that they believe they deserve more, that they are done shrinking. There is a toxic cultural grammar that surrounds ambition. It says that wanting success makes you greedy, that believing in yourself makes you arrogant, that setting boundaries with people who diminish you makes you cold. These are not neutral observations. They are tools of social control, internalized so thoroughly that most people enforce them on themselves without anyone having to ask. How many times have you preemptively apologized for your ambition in a conversation? How many times have you softened your vision to make it more palatable to someone whose opinion of it shouldn't have mattered at all? How many times have you performed doubt you didn't feel because confidence felt like a social risk? This is the cultural dimension of self-sabotage, the way an entire society can become complicit in keeping its members from fully inhabiting their own lives. And the most insidious part is that it doesn't announce itself as oppression. It announces itself as wisdom, as maturity, as knowing your place. But here is what knowing your place has cost the world. Every piece of art never made because the artist decided they weren't talented enough. Every business never launched because the founder talked themselves out of it the night before. Every conversation never had, every truth never spoken, every life never fully lived, because somewhere along the way the voice of the collective got louder than the voice of the individual soul. This is the consequence no one names directly. Not just the personal cost of self-sabotage, but the civilizational cost. The accumulated weight of all the human potential that was quietly, methodically, turned back at the threshold of its own becoming. So what happens when you don't wake up to this? What is the long arc of a life lived inside the pattern, never examined, never interrupted, never brought into the light of conscious reckoning? The answer is not dramatic. It doesn't announce itself with a single catastrophic moment. It arrives slowly, the way a room dims when the sun moves, so gradually that you adjust without noticing, until one day you look around and realize you've been living in the dark for years. The psychologist Martin Seligman spent decades studying what he called learned helplessness, the condition that emerges when a person, after repeated experiences of having no control over their outcomes, stops trying altogether. Not because the situation is still hopeless, but because the nervous system has encoded helplessness as a permanent feature of reality rather than a temporary circumstance. The most haunting part of Seligman's research was this. Even when the conditions changed, even when escape became genuinely possible, subjects who had learned helplessness did not attempt to leave. They had internalized their limitations so completely that freedom, when it finally arrived, was invisible to them. This is what a lifetime of unexamined self-sabotage produces. Not a person who tried and failed spectacularly, but a person who stopped trying so gradually, so quietly, that they eventually forgot what it felt like to try at all. Who built an identity around what they couldn't do, what wasn't for them, what other people seemed to have access to but they somehow didn't. And the tragedy compounds itself, because the person living inside that story is not unintelligent. They are often extraordinarily perceptive, deeply sensitive, and acutely aware of human experience. The very qualities that could fuel their most extraordinary contributions to the world become the instruments of their most precise self-limitation. They see too clearly all the ways it could go wrong. They feel too deeply the potential weight of disappointment. And so they protect themselves, with devastating thoroughness, from the very experiences that would transform them. Viktor Frankl, writing from the unimaginable darkness of a Nazi concentration camp, arrived at one of the most powerful psychological insights of the 20th century. He observed that the last of human freedoms, the one that could never be taken away regardless of circumstance, was the freedom to choose one's response to any given situation. Not control over what happens, but sovereignty over what it means and what you do with it. Frankl's insight is not a comfort. It is a confrontation. Because if the freedom to choose your response was never taken from you, if it has always been there, waiting, then the self-sabotage was never inevitable. It was always a choice made from a place of fear, with the information available at the time. And choices, unlike character, can be changed. This is the empowerment shift that actually means something. Not the motivational kind that fades by Wednesday, but the ontological kind that permanently alters how you see yourself in relation to your own patterns. You are not your sabotage. You are the consciousness that can observe it, name it, trace it back to its origin, and decide, for the first time with full awareness, whether it still serves you. That distinction is everything. The moment you stop identifying with the pattern and start observing it, you step outside of its jurisdiction. You are no longer the person who self-sabotages. You are the person who notices when the self-sabotage impulse arises, who understands what it's protecting, and who can choose consciously a different response. But this requires something that our culture is extraordinarily bad at cultivating, and that is the willingness to sit with discomfort without immediately resolving it. The capacity to feel the pull toward retreat and not follow it. To stand at the threshold of your own potential, feeling all the fear and unworthiness and social terror that lives there, and take one step forward anyway. James Baldwin wrote that not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. The facing is the work, not the fixing. Not the optimizing. The honest, unflinching, compassionate confrontation with the parts of yourself that learned, in very difficult circumstances, that contraction was the only safe response to expansion. Here is a practical shift that carries real psychological weight. Stop asking yourself, why do I keep doing this? That question assumes the behavior is irrational, and your brain will spend enormous energy defending it as rational rather than examining it. Instead, ask, what is this behavior protecting me from? That question assumes intelligence. It assumes purpose. And it opens a door into the genuine architecture of the pattern rather than a courtroom where you prosecute yourself for having it. When you approach the self-sabotage as a protector rather than an enemy, something extraordinary happens in the nervous system. The defensiveness drops. The shame retreats. And in that quieter interior space, you can actually hear what the fear is saying, what specific outcome it's trying to prevent, what ancient wound it's still standing guard over, what version of you it believes it's keeping safe. Then, and only then, can you have a real conversation with it. Not to silence it, not to override it with willpower, which always eventually runs out, but to update it, to bring it current information, to say, with genuine compassion for the part of you that learned fear as a survival strategy, I understand why you developed this response. I understand what you were protecting me from, and I need you to know that the situation has changed. We are not in that place anymore, and I am going to need you to trust me on this. This is not metaphor. This is how actual psychological integration works. This is what therapists trained in internal family systems, in somatic experiencing, in trauma-informed approaches spend years helping people do, not erase the fearful parts but update them. Bring them into the present. Let them rest from a job they've been doing for decades that no longer needs to be done. The mindset shift that follows this kind of internal work is not the aggressive, performance-oriented confidence that hustle culture sells. It is something quieter and far more durable. It is the calm of a person who has met their own fear and found it understandable, who has traced their own limitations back to their origin and found not proof of inadequacy, but evidence of survival, who has looked at the part of themselves they most despised and recognized it, with aching clarity, as the part that loved them most fiercely and simply didn't know another way. That recognition doesn't make the self-sabotage disappear overnight. Patterns woven into the nervous system over decades don't dissolve in a single moment of insight. But the insight changes the relationship. And the relationship changing is the beginning of everything. There is a final layer to this that we haven't touched yet. The deepest one. The one that, once you see it, reorganizes everything else into a new and irreversible clarity. Self-sabotage, at its most fundamental level, is not a behavioral problem. It is an identity problem. And identity is the most powerful force in human psychology, more powerful than motivation, more powerful than discipline, more powerful than any external circumstance you will ever face. William James, the father of American psychology, wrote that the deepest principle of human nature is the craving to be appreciated. But beneath even that craving lives something more primal, the need for a coherent sense of self. A story about who you are that holds together across time, across context, across the contradictions of a complex life. And here is the devastating consequence of that need. Your behavior will always align with your identity, even when your identity is wrong. Even when it was built from someone else's fear. Even when it was constructed in childhood from the limited materials available to a developing mind in a difficult environment. Your brain will sabotage any outcome that contradicts the story it holds about who you fundamentally are. This is why willpower fails so reliably and so completely. You cannot willpower your way out of an identity. You cannot discipline yourself into believing something about yourself that your deepest self-concept contradicts. Every time you try to act beyond your identity without changing the identity first, the system corrects. It finds a way to bring your results back into alignment with your story, because cognitive consistency, the need for your reality to match your self-concept, is one of the most powerful drives in human psychology. Leon Festinger's research on cognitive dissonance showed that when behavior and belief conflict, it is almost always the behavior that changes, not the belief. Which means that if you believe at the identity level that you are someone who doesn't finish things, who gets close but not quite there, who has potential but never quite arrives, then finishing will feel so psychologically foreign, so dissonant, that your system will manufacture reasons to stop. Every time. With breathtaking consistency. The real work then is not behavioral. It is not about better habits or smarter systems, though those have their place. The real work is the slow, serious, courageous reconstruction of the story you tell yourself about who you are. Not as an act of delusion or false positivity, but as an act of honest revision, taking the narrative that was written for you by your history and rewriting it with the authorship that was always rightfully yours. This is what Aristotle meant when he wrote that we are what we repeatedly do, not what we repeatedly try to do, not what we repeatedly intend to do, but what we do. And what we do is always, at its root, an expression of who we believe ourselves to be. Change the belief at the identity level and the doing follows, not through force, but through the natural expression of a self that has been genuinely transformed. So here is the most powerful question you will ever ask yourself. More powerful than any goal-setting exercise, any therapeutic framework, any motivational philosophy. Not what do I want to achieve, but who do I need to become for that achievement to feel like the natural expression of who I am? Because the person who achieves the thing you want doesn't just do different things. They are different at the level of self-concept. They carry a different story about their relationship to their own worthiness. They have, somewhere along the path, done the work of updating the identity that was installed in them without their consent, and replacing it with one that was chosen, examined, and genuinely owned. That work is not glamorous. It doesn't make for compelling social media content. It happens in the quiet confrontations you have with yourself at 2 a.m., in the therapy session where something finally cracks open, in the journal entry where you write something true about yourself for the first time and feel both terrified and relieved by the sight of it. It happens in the moment you choose to send the email anyway, submit the work anyway, have the conversation anyway, not because the fear is gone, but because you have decided, with full consciousness, that the fear is no longer the most important voice in the room. Rainer Maria Rilke wrote in his letters to a young poet that we must assume our existence as broadly as we in any way can. Not partially. Not provisionally. Not with one foot perpetually ready to retreat, but broadly, fully. With the kind of radical inhabitation of your own life that most people spend their entire existence avoiding, because it requires accepting responsibility for everything, not just the failures you can attribute to circumstance, but the possibilities you have been quietly, methodically refusing to step into. This is the quiet revolution that is happening right now in people who have chosen to look at themselves honestly. Not the loud revolution of protest and proclamation. They are done pre-sabotaging to avoid disappointment. Done shrinking to maintain belonging. Done mistaking their survival patterns for their personality. Done confusing the ceiling that fear built with the actual limits of what is possible for them. You are watching this video because something in you recognizes itself in this conversation. Something in you knew before you could articulate it, that there was more to the story of your self-limitation than bad habits and poor discipline. Something in you was ready for a different kind of conversation. One that takes you seriously enough to tell you the hard and luminous truth. That recognition is not accidental. It is the most important faculty you possess. The capacity for self-awareness, for metacognition, for looking at your own patterns from a place of enough distance to actually see them clearly. Most people never develop that capacity fully. You are already exercising it by being here, by sitting with discomfort instead of clicking away, by letting these ideas land instead of deflecting them. That is not nothing. That is, in fact, everything. Because awareness precedes change the way dawn precedes day, quietly, without fanfare, but with the absolute certainty that what follows will be fundamentally different from what came before. You are not the sum of your self-sabotage. You are not the ceiling that fear constructed above you. You are not the role the family system assigned you, or the identity the educational system graded you into, or the self-concept that a difficult history installed without your permission. You are the consciousness that can see all of that clearly. And the moment you can see the cage, you are already, in the most important sense, free. This is the revolution that doesn't trend. It doesn't go viral. It happens one person at a time, in the interior silence of genuine self-examination, and it changes everything, not with noise, but with the irreversible, accumulating force of a person who has finally decided to stop standing in their own light. You are part of that. You always were. The question was never whether you were capable. The question was always whether you were ready to believe it. Now you are. If this reached something real in you, if it cracked something open or named something you've been carrying without language, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment not with what you thought, but with what you felt. That distinction matters more than you know. And if you want to keep going deeper into the psychology of identity, of fear, of the hidden architecture of human behavior, then stay, because this is only the beginning of the conversation.